So, do you remember the Monopoly Man, also known as Mr. Monopoly? Well, as you're seeing right here, this is how he looks. Except, it's not. He actually doesn't have a monocle. Also, do you remember Looney Tunes? I bet most of us do. If you look at the logo right here, do you find anything odd here? Because I do, as I remember the spelling of Looney Tunes like this. And I'm not the only one that thinks like that. And if we go back to memory lane, I'm sure you're familiar with the Berenstein Bears, a very popular children's book as well as a TV show series. The nice bear family that lived in the woods. If you remember their last name, then I guess you thought it was correctly spelled in this image. You think it is spelled Berenstein? Well, you are wrong. Surprising, isn't it? The truth is that their last name is Berenstein. If you are still in doubt, you can look up the book cover. It has always been Berenstein on this universe. There are more examples of this effect. These three I felt like sharing because it also had effect on me. So this phenomenon is called the Mandela Effect. It got its name when many people claimed that they remember Nelson Mandela, the famous ex-president from South Africa, dying. Well, he was still in prison back in the 80s, and they claimed to remember clips of his funeral on TV, and even his wife giving a memorable speech. The idea of group false memories had been around in various forms, however, and as it turns out, the Mandela example had too. Although the term went viral and is the one familiar to everyone now, there is a scientific term for it. The Mass Memory Discrepancy Effect, or MMDE. This covers the ME as well as wider instances of group false memories, such as deliberate propaganda, mass brainwashing with advertising, and etc. But Nelson Mandela's supposed death was not the first occurrence of the Mandela Effect. The earliest instance of the MMDE, or the Mandela Effect, is related to an West African ethnic group named the Tiv. The Tiv had the tradition of recording the settlement of significant events orally, such as land ownership disputes in court. The Brits occupied them in 1906, but they had their own written record of these events. In effect, the two systems are running in parallel. After 40 years, it was noticed that there were significant inconsistencies between the two systems. It's covered in Walter J. Ong's book, Orality and Literacy, page 47. The Tiv people claim that the written records are wrong. The suggestion is the integrity of the past was subordinate to the integrity of the present. A simpler occurrence of the Mandela Effect, which also was one of the first instances in history, was when in the 1980s, Polonia railway station's main clock was stopped in a cause of a terrorist bomb. It was repaired and worked normally for many years, when it stopped due to ordinary mechanical failure. It was decided to leave the clock broken because it was thought that it can't be repaired anymore due to the effect of the terrorist bomb that exploded a few years earlier. What happened next is extraordinary. Most people thought that the clock had been stopped for the entire 16 years since the explosion. This includes staff actually working at the station during this time, and many travelers would have seen and relied on it daily during this period. A detailed study was conducted, and it was found to be an early instance of collective false memory, or what would be called today an instance of the Mandela Effect. One popular explanation is that it is just a false memory. Backing this up is the fact that the Mandela Effect revolves around trivial spelling mistakes, misheard lyrics, or dates of relatively unimportant events. What I'm trying to say is that these occurrences are minor and usually specified around the details rather than the essence, which change. And the fact the same changes happen to a group of people just shows that all our brains work the same way. Memories aren't pure. They can be distorted by any number of factors, including bias, association, imagination, and peer pressure. Getting back to the Berenstein versus Berenstein quandary. One explanation of the spelling is that the names ending with Steen are far more common than names ending with Stein, so the memories are distorted by the associations and expectations. And the people that remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison in the 80s, there might be two factors that made up this false memory. The fact that he was in prison somehow might have triggered the fact that he is dead, so that being pierced into a false memory in the absence of an actual recollection of the announcement of his death. The counter-argument is that the people who experience these memories are as real as any other memory they have. You might as well say they ate something different for dinner today when they know what they actually ate for dinner. The memory itself might not even be wrong, but it's the specifics in it that are wrong. For example, many people remember Sinbad in Shazam. You'd have thought it enough just to remember the name of the movie, which didn't exist, but why him and not Eddie Murphy, Richard Pryor, or etc.? People have noticed that the Mandela Effect only occurs in specific situations, and that it doesn't occur in situations when we are talking about sports events or money. The reason might be, if a detail has changed in a sports event, that would actually create a chain reaction and the effect would be more noticeable. For example, even goals scored in a soccer league table affects other teams, player histories, etc. Same for money. A bank account changing means some other has to as well, and in turn the ones they are connected to. The effect might even happen in these instances, but the disruption is total, so it affects everybody, but no one can see it. Another theory, which is called the many worlds theory, suggests that there are infinite amounts of parallel universes, and that these universes are identical except for one particular detail. So when the universes collide or cross over, it's that detail which moves from one to the other. And only a few people see this change as having affected their past. Backing this up is the fact that particles can exist in multiple locations before being observed, when they collapse into what that observer calls reality. So, if there are infinite amounts of universes, there should be infinite amounts of worlds. So does that mean that there are infinite amount of views? Well, not quite, and it's actually quite complicated. The universe we perceive as reality is finite, but the matter which makes it up is superimposed many or possibly an infinite number of times. So the fundamental particles which make up our reality immediately prior to this were made of quote-unquote waves of possibilities, and they will occur instantly after they have collapsed into this particular reality. Our entire concept of now is based at the position these waves were in at that moment, and that now is just a merely hard snapshot. So if these waves are able to continue side by side with minor differences, it might be that somehow people do move from one arrangement to other, whilst retaining their memories of the original. It can even happen for many times. For them, the past seems to have changed, but for others unaffected, it has not. One more complicated theory suggests that these occurrences of the Mandela Effect coincided with the activation of the Large Hadron Collider, or LHC, at CERN. CERN's experiments are intended to find illusory particles that could potentially show evidence of multiverse, create tiny black holes, or discover dark matter. While all of this sounds very exciting, it also sounds potentially dangerous. While the scientists at CERN assure us their experiments are conducted on such a controlled small scale as to have little if any negative consequences, some believe that their meddling in quantum fields has led to some strange effects, and that might include the Mandela Effect. But these possibilities or theories I'm looking at seem to be far-fetched, because of the use of words like parallel universes somehow colliding. What if we're just not seeing the full picture? What if we just don't know yet everything about how nature works? I mean, we still don't know the real definition of what is consciousness. Some scientists even theorize that our memories aren't even stored in our brain. We've yet to discover a lot of things. Science has continuously shown that one discovery merely leads to a new layer of mystery, and no self-respecting scientist today would ever repeat that mistake. Humans are curious beings. We are asking questions because everything needs to have a logical explanation, and even this effect probably has a logical explanation. What I'm trying to say is that the Mandela Effect is a normal part of reality. It is a normal event, but we just don't know the answer to how it works yet. We try to seek for the answer as some paranormal, phenomenal explanation because we are curious, and it is good that we are looking for the answer. But let me tell you this. The idea here is that it's not necessarily parallel worlds or time travel, but just something we cannot yet even conceive of and possibly never will.